Sailor Moon is easily one of the best girl action animes of all time. It gained a massive popularity in Japan in the early 90s as well as parts of the world, attracting not just girls but boys as well. It wasn't until 1995 when DiC acquired the rights for the Sailor Moon series for the North American market. It was a slow start, but eventually the popularity grew in North America, thanks to in part by the US action block Toonami, which also led to the anime boom in the late 90s and early 2000s, which became part of 90s pop culture. So the question you may ask is, why wasn't there a video game based on Sailor Moon? In Japan, during the height of the Sailor Moon's popularity, there were a lot of games that were released for the three major consoles of the time in Japan: the Super Famicom, the PC Engine, the Sega Megadrive, ranging from 2D fighters, RPGs, puzzles, and side-scrolling beat-em-ups. The first side-scrolling beat-em-up of Sailor Moon for the Super Famicom even got a release outside of Japan, in France for the PAL Super Nintendo. So why wasn't there a North American release for these games? Keep in mind the show was dubbed in 1995, and at the time the 64-bit era had just begun, with the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation, and the N64. By this time, the Sailor Moon games for the 64-bit consoles were merely 3D fighters, if you can call it that. And of course, the fact that they were too old to be imported and the 16-bit era was about to end. Plus, and I hate to say it, video game companies in North America aren't going to risk money on girl-type games. Unless if they have big boobs and showing their underwear, they're very notorious for not being big sellers. But let's get this out of the way and review the Sailor Moon for the Sega Megadrive, aka the Sega Genesis. Now, the game was developed by Maybe. Very little info is known about this company, but they were the ones responsible for making games from popular animes for the Mega Drive and other Sega platforms, as well as porting the Super Famicom version of the Sailor Moon beat-em-up to the Mega Drive, which was released a year after the Super Famicom version, with some differences, as the intro will tell you. Now, you can also check out my review of the Super Famicom version. Unlike the Super Famicom version, Sailor Moon doesn't really come at you when you first start the game. It's just the Moon Kingdom and the Earth. That's about it. Now, you'll notice right off the bat the major differences from the Super Famicom version. For one thing, there is open text in the bottom of your screen, where pretty much Luna communicates with you, although I don't really see her since she doesn't appear in the game for some reason. Also, you'll notice that you can destroy anything in the areas around you. For example, I just destroyed a glass display area in that store. Talk about vandalism. At least it's a lot better than just destroying one major thing like the car in the Super Famicom version. Now, for the control settings, it's a lot different than the Super Famicom version. For one thing, you just don't hold two buttons together. As a matter of fact, for the special attack, you only just hit one button, which is the C button on the Sega controller. Now, for the controllers, I definitely recommend you getting the second generation Sega Genesis controllers for this one, because the first generation controllers are just lousy on this game. I mean, the directional pad on this game is just really horrible. But thankfully, you can use the second generation controller to fix this issue. Now, one thing you also notice about the Mega Drive version is the levels. These levels are exclusive to the Sega Mega Drive version. This elevator scene, for example, is not in the Super Famicom version. Now, in terms of the enemies, they still crack quite a punch just like in the Super Famicom version. Not much of a difference. However, you can still change the difficulty in the options menu if you choose to. Now, as for the boss battles, they're very different than the Super Famicom version. In the Mega Drive version, you get your occasional monster, but you also get to fight the 4 generals of the Negaverse as well, including the last final boss, Queen Beryl, if you beat it in easy mode. If you beat it in hard mode, you can actually defeat the actual boss of the Negaverse, Queen Metalia. Once you start the boss battle, a friend will give you an upgrade, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, I'm just going to show you the video. One other major change is the characters' fight styles. For example, Sailor Jupiter only uses her fist to fight in the Super Famicom version, whereas in the Sega Mega Drive version, she actually uses her kicks. Now, as for the music in the game, I don't really care what the angry video game nerd says. I think the music in the Sega Genesis Mega Drive is a lot better than the Super Nintendo Super Famicom. But that depends on the game that you use for these systems. I mean, some games do actually sound well on certain systems. But for Sailor Moon, it's actually a lot better. Here's an example between them. All in all, the Sega Mega Drive version of the Sailor Moon beat-em-up game is actually a lot better than the Super Famicom version. Granted, there are some downsides. For example, the Famicom version actually has 2-player modes, so you and a friend can defeat the evil forces of the Negaverse. The Sega Megadrive version, however, only has one player mode, so you're pretty much on your own defeating the evil forces. Graphics wise, it's not really well polished as the Super Famicom version, but the extra levels do make up for it. Because the Sega Megadrive wasn't so popular in Japan, only limited quantities were released. If you're lucky, you might get a copy for this game for around maybe $60 cheap. If you're planning to get one brand spanking new, it will cost you around $100 to maybe $200 more. But is the game really worth it? No. If you have a copy of this game for the Super Famicom, there's not really a need, but if you're looking for accuracy, because the Sega Megadrive version does actually let you fight the 4 generals of the Negaverse, this is probably worth a pickup. Also, it's not really worth the money. If you have an emulator for your computer, you can just get them and download it for free. So, alright guys, that's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed this very special review. And to end this video, here is one of the gameplay footage of one of the bosses in the game. Sit back and enjoy. Thanks for watching.